Awesome.
I love that lady's voice. Hi, Andrea. Hi, Brady. Just sort of clicking through here. Hi, Michelle. Hi, council member. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Awesome. All right, I think we have looks like people are done trickling in. We have a pretty consistent number here, so we'll dive in. So just to start, wanted to introduce myself. My name is Alex Burkhart. I'm a senior urban designer at Scape and a member of the project team. Very excited to be here with you this evening. Before I kind of just dive in to kind of introduce all of you to what we'll be kind of doing in this virtual workspace today, I just want to take a moment to also introduce my other colleagues that are with me. So I will quickly turn it over to Christine and Eliza to introduce yourselves as well.
Sure. Hi, I'm Christine Mclinski. I'm a project architect at Seldorf Architects. I worked on the head end site design and I'm excited to work on this one as well.
And I'm Liza Faber. I work for Grayson and Sawyer. I'm a civil engineer and I'm helping out with this project, and I'm hoping to capture all of your feedback tonight. So bear with me, but hopefully we can get started.
Awesome.
Tanya, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Sure. Tanya Casada with Brown and Caldwell, also project engineer, worked on the head end site with Kristen.
Terrific. Thank you. And as you all know, Alicia's with us as well from DEP. So we've got quite a group of us here who can kind of help answer any of your questions and really just want to create kind of a space for us to, as Anna had mentioned, really hear from you, gather your thoughts and input today. So for those of you that are not familiar, just to quickly introduce you, this is a program called Miro. So it's kind of a virtual workspace. And so the hope today is, well, you know, unfortunately, we can't all be in a room together this evening. We're really kind of doing our best to simulate that experience here. So both Christine and I will kind of be facilitating the conversation over the next 60 minutes or so. And then really, we will be capturing your feedback in the form of this kind of virtual workspace. So if you see Liza zooming in and out, or I'm pulling out post-its, it's really because we're just trying to capture your feedback today and then really kind of document what we are hearing from all of you. So as Anna mentioned, really just want to, you know, this is an opportunity to shape the design. So if we could just zoom in a little bit, Liza, to that kind of board right there. Perfect. So this first board is actually just kind of an overview of the slides that we just shared with you. So if at any point you have questions or want to refer to the material that was presented, we can reference that. On this next board is really where we want to spend the majority of our time with you this evening. And so we have a couple of prompts and questions. You can see there's a kind of a site plan here, which this area and this kind of yellowish green is really the kind of where we see this, you know, the most potential for public access. So this is really where we would love to get your input on the waterfront experience program, really whatever it is that you want to talk to us about this evening. And then we also have some existing site photos if there's anything in particular we want to kind of talk about and reference to the site today. So with that, I just ask that everyone keep themselves muted while others are speaking. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll kind of go through you all one by one and just provide a space for you all to kind of speak. And if you are not comfortable with that, we also have the chat feature. So feel free to kind of present your questions in whichever way works best for you. So with that, I will open it up. Anyone want to go first, have questions? We have a couple of prompts on the screen if no one has any thoughts to kick us off, but I have a hunch that someone in this group would love to kind of get us started.
I had a question about the road with the cul-de-sac. Is that extremely important to have that level of vehicular access into the space? Is it required, I should say?
I'll let Christine speak to that.
You're speaking about this, the one that's labeled access drive on this drawing?
Yes.
Yes, so there is vehicular access required to get into the CSO facility proper, and also the salt shed that will be within the slot to the south. We're still evaluating all of the access that's needed further west on the site, but trying to make sure that we have enough access for GCC and composting wherever that lands on the site, and also any sort of emergency fire department ambulance access that may be required.
But at this juncture, like this is super diagrammatic, right? Like it's not designed. So if you have any thoughts of, about how you'd like to see that take shape, feel free to let us know.
Carol. Yes.
Hi, thanks. I got here late, but I'm still going to ask this question, knowing full well people might roll their eyes because it was already answered. Quick question. The big reuse composting site is still going to be here? Is it? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So we'll be accommodating sanitations, salt services, big reuses, compost, and GCC on site in the permanent condition in the final project.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you guys want to raise your hands using a little emoji at the bottom, if you don't have your video on, and we also can't see all of you at the same time, that's a good way to do it. Okay. Jessica, you want to go first? Jessica, we can't hear you, or I can't hear you.
I can't either.
Jessica, check your audio settings, okay? And we'll go to Magnus.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I think I work in the West Village, and I'm very impressed of what Hudson River Park, what they've been doing. There's even Pier 25, which is sort of a natural habitat restoration, fairly recent. And there are various projects. I think we should distinguish ourselves from that, since we're Gowanus and we're Brooklyn, and bring out the most natural features that we have. So I would vote for a naturalized edge, as a prime importance. I think boardwalk would come second to enable, people with perhaps mobility issues to be able to come forth. I'm thinking of a boardwalk that could even be elevated if you want to, so you don't even have to be on top of sensitive nature. I'm also thinking that bike access would be important, but access to get to the point, but then you transition from bike to foot, I think is an interesting idea. At the very tip of the peninsula seems to be potential for some kind of gathering area. I don't know, like a big tent. I'm thinking of Christopher Street Pier now. I'm not saying we have to follow what they did there, but perhaps something more organic in wood as opposed to plastic and metal. Yes, I think I'll pause there.
Thank you so
Perfect.
much for your comments.
That's super helpful. I think naturalized edge and boardwalk would be a really kind of exciting condition. I'd be curious if others in the group feel similarly. But thank you, Magnus. That was really helpful feedback. Andrea or Andrea, not quite sure how you pronounce it.
Andrea. And I have lots of thoughts and feelings about this site. I think one thing I just would like to talk about a little bit is back to this sort of cul-de-sac question. I think specifically the way that the 2nd Avenue is ending in a large cul-de-sac at the shoreline, I think is troubling, just because I feel like many of us would really like to see something would really like the road to step back from 2nd Avenue as much as possible. I understand that there might need to be access to the CSO facility there, but if there's any way to either make that not a cul-de-sac, or like maybe not a street at all, that potentially, DEP can drive on when needing to access the CSO facility, but it could just actually be a street end that is totally public, and that could actually allow the sort of boat access and water access that I think a lot of folks want to see.
And just to clarify, you're meaning then boat access that would come kind of more central to the site versus, for instance, kind of where 6th and 2nd meet.
I think that there is desire for access to the water in both of those places.
Okay.
Both at the end of 2nd Avenue and at the end of 6th Avenue. But whether that's a boat launch at both places, I think that's a question. But like getting down to the water at both places, I think, and being able to get in and out of the water at both places, I think is very important.
Thanks for clarifying. Helpful feedback. Andrew, I believe you were next.
Hi, yeah, I wanted to know if there was requirements by DEP or the state or EPA about bulkhead versus soft shoreline. I think, Magnus kind of touched on that with his desire, which I agree with, but I was curious if there's certain requirements by those agencies to have particular types of shorelines.
Andrew, I'm not like completely familiar with that, but I do believe that the way that bulkhead is being reconstructed is based on the direction from the EPA. That doesn't necessarily preclude us from doing other things to soften that edge, though.
Just to add to that, we're considering all different possibilities of edge conditions. So really would love to hear feedback from everyone this evening on kind of what the ideal edge condition could be. And it doesn't have to be uniform across the site either, right? So we can kind of talk about if there are certain areas where something a little bit more naturalized versus like a hardened edge feels, more kind of applicable or appropriate for the community too.
Thank you.
I believe next we had Brady.
I'm sorry. Yes, I was curious if there are any plans for industrial use on the site, just given that it's, this is displacing substantial industrial space. And I think it could be a really good opportunity for something like a green industrial incubator on the site.
Thanks, Brady. I don't know whether you guys can tell, but they are typing up your comments on these little adorable Post-it notes. They're kind of small on my computer.
We can zoom in a little bit, Liza.
I love it. They're so cute.
We have not discussed that as a team. Right now had really been looking at, as Kevin had mentioned, the facilities that are going to be required on site, and then kind of considering what those, those remaining 2 acres that Anna talked about could be. So really here today to just kind of collect everyone's thoughts on the kind of potential programming of that public space. Terrific. Celeste.
Thank you. I wanted to comment on a couple of things that I think are particularly unique on this particular piece of the canal. There's a lot of change happening, obviously, all along this whole stretch of the city. But this particular point is pretty unusual in a bunch of ways, where I think it's a rare opportunity to really push for having more natural edges on this piece of property because of the tenets of the site, because of its placement in the canal, because of its odd shape. And so there are fewer competing interests for how that edge might work. And so this is a great place to show how that works and to give the public more access to those soft shorelines and to test out a bunch of stuff. So I would love to see a lot more soft edges, more habitat all throughout this whole site. The other piece that I think is particularly unique here on the boat access pieces are the end of 2nd Avenue and the 6th Street turning basin are both really great protected areas within the canal for boaters to launch from. The 2nd Avenue one is a kind of rare street end opportunity in an industrial area that might allow boaters who want to drive boats in or back them in. It's a great access point for more powered boat users, in addition to others as one potential. I know that there are other potential uses for that street end, but something that's a little rampier, that's broader, there aren't that many places where we're likely to see those continue in the canal over the long run. So I think that's one of the reasons that I would like to see that access point maintained to the degree possible. And then within the 6th Street turning basin, this is a spot where there are very few other uses, and you have enough space and enough length to be able to put in particularly an ADA accessible dock on this particular location, which is a challenge because of the narrowness of the canal throughout the rest of the waterway. So those are 3 things that I think make this site particularly unique for some of the requests that some of us are making. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just to clarify, so you're saying kind of a more accessible area within this kind of portion?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's a really important point.
I have one more question about that also, which is that currently I'm not totally clear on whether that is a public space, that section on the 6th Street turning basin. I feel like I've heard some different things. So I'm just wondering, is that a public space in the 6th Street turning basin? How would that work?
Alicia, I'll let you.
I'm not sure I understand your question, Celeste. Are you talking about the area in yellow, or are you talking about the water itself?
No, not the water, the yellow.
The yellow, yeah. Anything in yellow, we're thinking is an opportunity.
Great. Michelle, you're next.
Hi, Michelle.
Michelle,
Can't
we
hear you, Michelle.
you. Zoom. We'll come back to you.
It's such a pain. Sorry.
Gary. Gary, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself.
Hi, sorry about that.
Hi.
I would like to make some comments as well about access. An opportunity for access is a very fuzzy term. I don't like that. I'm sorry. I think it's pretty plain what we're asking. Can we access it as public? Is there going to be like sunrise, sunset? Is it going to be gated? 2nd Avenue is a public street end, so I kind of assume that that will always be 100% accessible public. You know, if you can give us like a how public, how accessible, I think that's what we're kind of asking. The rest of the shoreline, I assume the bulkhead has to go in some way in order to dredge. So at what height does that bulkhead end? Is it like low water, high water? You know, what's the engineering for that? You know, is a soft edge from high water going back to whatever grade, or is a soft edge going into the water? And for 6th Street, I think like a small boat type launch access, ADA, with a really nice ramp and a really nice floating dock. And I think access for Second Avenue would be like a classic kind of trailerable boat ramp. I would like to see fishermen using this as a launch point. It's some of the safest water, paddling, human-powered vessel water in New York City. Everywhere else that there's public kayak launches are actually not that safe. The East River is kind of expert level paddling. Hunter's Point, expert level paddling. I'm not sure it feels as a paddler, as an avid paddler, a very good experienced paddler. I think most of the public accessible boat launches are actually horribly unsafe. I think they're actually designed to not be used. I was directed to launch directly under the Manhattan Bridge when I first came to New York City paddling, and that is there's not many people that could manage that and actually get themselves back in again. So that's kind of my comments.
Thank you. Alicia, I'll let you speak to the kind of question about the degree of public access, and then I can speak a little more to the kind of elevations and naturalized edge.
So I think, we're super early in design and we've got a lot to figure out. But I think that probably we would adhere to, how, typically how parks manages open spaces, sort of dawn to dusk, that type of thing. For safety, oh, excuse me, sorry, email. So it's still super early, but we'll, that's something that we have to figure out with our partners on site. And I think Liza or Tanya, do you want to speak to the edge condition question quickly? And then thank you also, Gary, for your comments about the launches. I think that we want this to be a safe space for everyone.
It's the safest water in New York City. I've paddled everywhere around Manhattan. I've gone through Hell's Gate on a paddleboard, which is quite an experience, but I guarantee you that Gowanus Canal is the safest. Once you get the water cleaned up, it will be an absolute boating paradise for small vessels.
Thank you, Gary.
Alex, did you want to cover it, or I know that
Before Tanya.
Okay, the bulkhead is going to be about, in order for the dredging to be completed, is about elevation 10. And then I know that the high water level here averages about 3. So it is going to extend a bit above that high water level. And that's where that soft edge might begin.
So that would actually probably end up like 2 feet above mean high water.
It might even be a little bit higher than that. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, Michelle, do you want to try again?
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yay, we hear you.
Okay, good. Okay. Nothing like the Eventbrite thing. So I just have 2 quick questions that might impact the ideas. So with the partner organization facilities, is there going to be room in there for like a classroom or something like that because of the educational opportunities that the area presents? Will that be accommodated in that area? And if not, then I think some kind of outdoor classroom like space would be appropriate. And then I'm not a boater or paddler, but I appreciate all the really detailed and thoughtful comments that have been made with regard to that. And I guess the question I have is related to that is there a need for storage in addition to launches? And because that obviously would change some of the design options. I certainly love the natural edge suggestions that were made. And then the only other thought I had is, at different points in time, during earlier community engagement processes, we were talking about pedestrian bridges over different parts of the canal. And this is also a unique spot for a pedestrian bridge between this and the new park across the way as part of Gowanus Green. That's what I have. Thanks,
Michelle. All right, Brian, you want to unmute yourself? You are unmuted.
Can you hear me okay?
I hear you. There you go.
All right. Sorry, I'm trying to do this on my phone, but it's a little bit awkward to do, so bear with me. I volunteer with the Gowanus Canal Conservancy, and I first wanted to just do 2 things that I'd like to, I suppose, advocate for. First being having a natural edge, but also with a meandering path. We saw that the public that did come in for events doing volunteering, they really enjoyed walking around that meandering path. And I think it really provided a sort of natural experience for the public that was visiting the space. And space that I think Michelle had mentioned, was something that we always found a lot of use for. And if there was a permanent structure, we had a sort of quasi movable structure, which would have been nice to have as something permanent. So if there is capacity for that, I think that'd be great.
Like a shade structure type thing?
A shade structure as well. Yes, we did have a shade structure, which people really enjoyed, and having that also double as like an educational space. Yeah, that would be good. The other thing I wanted to mention, so I'm here mostly as a Gowanus Canal Conservancy volunteer, but more unofficially so, I also work for DCAS Energy Management. And part of what we do at DCAS is put all the solar on the building. So trying to find the right balance between advocating for green infrastructure with this project, but also just curious about solar because there were solar panels on, or there are on the current compost bays. And I don't know if DEP can answer this, maybe this is a DSMY question, but I was wondering if those solar panels were going to be reused with the new bays. And I guess second off, is there going to be any solar on the compost facility or on the CSO facility? Or is that all going to be green roof?
So we're super early. You know, obviously I work with Dylan a lot at DCAS on the solar stuff. Do you know Dylan?
Oh, Dylan Roleri? Yeah.
So we at DEP have been partnering with him and rolling out just like a huge amount of solar on a bunch of our facilities. So I've been working with him on that a little bit, but yes, obviously, you know, there's the local law, which requires either, you know, a green roof or solar panels. We have to sort of evaluate, you know, what's gonna work best. We obviously, you know, I think there's probably always an interest in reusing things and right, reduce, reuse, recycle. So point definitely taken. But yeah, we'll have to talk to sanitation about that one.
Okay. And also thanks for putting this on, and also thanks to DEP and to DSMY and Parks for being such great partners on putting solar on the buildings in the city.
Awesome. You're very welcome. Thank you, Brian.
Alicia, I will just add to that the feedback we've gotten back from DSNY and composting so far is that they would like to continue to use that solar. So we are going, you know, we're working with them to try to make that possible.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Glad to hear. Thank you.
Terrific. Chris, I don't think we've heard from you yet. If you want to unmute yourself.
There we go.
You did it.
Yeah. It's such a great site. There's so many great opportunities for environmental education. There's opportunities for green infrastructure in green roofs, but balancing the green roofs and solar roofs is going to be interesting. One thing about having a green infrastructure roof is that's another opportunity for space that can be used for education. So there could be paths and walkways on a green roof as well. So that's another spot, especially if we're using a native plant palette there. That's going to attract more of our wild insects. That's going to attract birds and other wildlife that would be really interesting to observe over time. It seems like the prominence there, the very point of the peninsula, seems like the most logical place to think about having a wild edge. Although I know that there's also an opportunity there for bridging the canal at that point and really connecting the two sides, of bridging it for pedestrians, wheelchairs, and other accessible tools and bikes. And combining that with a wild edge, you could have kind of a flyover boardwalk. I don't know if anybody's been to Ecology Park in Brooklyn, but that has a really good example of where they've tried to do a restoration, and there's just raised boardwalk over all of this. There's points where you're like 6 feet above, but there's shrubs and trees that are rising up to meet the boardwalk. So there's still lots of access to the vegetation. A practical challenge for all of this is going to be managing invasive plants. And so planning for maintenance, especially in the initial years, is something that has to be thought about. There has to be a plan for people who are staff and volunteers. Pulling invasive plants is a really satisfying activity. To help get the really kind of a restoration of a more natural shoreline here. And then that's going to amplify the opportunities for environmental education as well as directly supporting biodiversity. It's going to make that most exposed portion of the site more resilient to surges and other impacts in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Great feedback. I'm hearing some common threads through some of these comments, which is great to hear. Sandy, I don't think we've heard from you yet.
Okay. Hi. So most of the time that I spend on the salt lot, I do volunteer work with the compost, but I have to say that the garden there is such an unexpected joy to see and to wander through. So whenever I go there, I take the time to wander in this amazing garden that is natural and flowing. And it's a pretty big garden, and you can spend a lot of time there and you also get a really good feel for the water as well. And it's an amazing spot because it is surrounded by industry and the parole board and all this stuff. And you're in this just exquisite, natural, well-organized place. So that is something that should be rebuilt in a way. And I want to say that the Conservancy knows better what they want and how they want it. So they should talk about that. And the people who run the compost site are so knowledgeable and efficient and they know everything that needs to be done better about the facility that's there, and they should talk. And the people who are at the Gowanus dredgers know much better about how they should have boat access, and all of these things should be there. And I think whatever is going to be built there or rebuilt there, it all should be made out of the 100% green products and be environmentally sustainable. And it should be the best that it can be and protected from the climate emergencies, as well as not contributing to any more sadness. I mean, it's a great place and everything about it is pretty good. The road in there is not easy. It's pretty bumpy and icky. So maybe there could be a better road when you have to get in there and pull the toters from the 24/7 compost drop off, which is also great, and have it a little easier way to do some of the things you need to do there. But in general, it's a pretty unique place and needs to have as much retained as possible with a huge CSO tank. Okay,
Andy.
Thank you for your enthusiasm.
I am enthusiastic.
I love it. I appreciate it. Next.
Sandy, you're awesome.
Oh.
I just said, Sandy, you're awesome.
Who said that?
Celeste. Hi.
Oh, you too.
You guys, I love our breakout room. It's such joy in here. All right. Natasha, you want to go?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yes, I think I do co-sign on a lot of things that people have said already. I think I just want to point out the opportunity for accessibility on 2nd Avenue or like people coming to the site. So I think as I'm a staff of the Gowanus Canal Conservancy, but I'm also an urban forest enthusiast. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for trees and rain gardens along 2nd Avenue and possibly along the access drive. And sidewalks that are way more accessible than they are currently. It's very difficult to get to the site for anyone that is not, I would say, fully able. And I think it's also an opportunity for people to more easily get to the parole office too, or any of the businesses along 2nd Avenue. And then possibly a bridge that would connect to the west side of the canal. So.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Gil, you had your hand raised next.
Hello, my name is Gil Lopez. I'm a former employee of Big Reuse and still a huge advocate of community composting in New York City. And I do not live in Gowanus. I've worked in Gowanus off and on. I still work down there from time to time. And I can just say that Big Reuse is really excited about having a little bit more insight on how to design this site. I know that the footprint that they were on had a lot of constraints, and we're still dealing with constraints, but I think that the next iteration of this facility is going to be better. I just want to advocate for a couple of things. I'm sorry, I was in group 2 and I'm dropping my call, and now I'm in group 3. If I'm repeating anything, I'm sorry, but
No,
in group
good.
2, there was a couple of folks who were advocating for aesthetic quality and really wanted to make sure that the facade of the building matched up with the historic IBZ. And I agree that's kind of interesting, but I want to just go on the record saying that we are in a climate crisis, and it is very important that we allocate as much money and intentionally build performative landscapes that can get out of this immediately. And whatever that means, I just want to be on record saying that we need to be focusing on the problems and not aesthetics. It's really nice to make things beautiful. I'm really glad that Gowanus is changing. I've been working down there for the past 12 years, and it's really becoming a nice place. But we need to focus on the climate and environmental justice. And I'll also say that the impromptu dance parties that happen at the end of that street are really great. And if that could continue to happen without formalizing and making it some sort of exclusive thing that is expensive concert venue, I would advocate for that too. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you. Let's see. Marcos, I don't think we've heard from you yet.
Well,
hi.
Oh, Marcus.
We can hear you.
Go ahead, Marcus. I thought I heard Magnus, but go ahead, Marcus.
Sorry, I
Oh,
thought
sorry.
I wasn't sure. So okay.
Apologies, I said
okay,
Marcos.
Magnus. Is that okay? Alex, thank you, and Alicia, thank you, and thanks to DEP for actually making such a participative process happen. I'm a volunteer at the Gowanus Canal Conservancy. I like to just maybe in the spirit of suggesting additional items that could be incorporated. Many of them have been said already. I think a pedestrian bridge or a connection across the canal is very important. I know it was mentioned before, but I think it is not only part of creating and interconnecting the community, but I think from a safety and even just a pure equity point of view, I think is a very important thing to do to make sure that everybody feels safe, but that everybody that is in one side of the canal feels that they also belong in the other side. The soft edges and landscape that actually solves the climate crisis is also very important. I don't know if there was any discussion earlier or in the presentation as to what can happen right next to or on top of the current tanks. I heard a little bit about solar versus green or green and blue. I'm hoping we're considering everything. yeah, that's the third point. The fourth point, a lot of people brought education, and the biggest issue that we have clearly for the next century is a climate crisis, and we have to solve it by creating advocates of every age, of every background. So I really hope that educational spaces are incorporated, in a way that is also sustainable and thoughtful, versus actually having, landscape that performs. But I think educational spaces are critical so we can continue creating young advocates of every age and spirit, that actually solve the biggest issue that we have, which is the climate and the water quality crisis, which is what we're going to be living with for the next generations to come. And the final one, I know that there were some discussions on a turnaround. I also understand DEP does have some requirements, for operations, turnaround radius of vehicles, etc. But I really hope that as an agency, since you're creating something that is new, like this participative process, that you really rethink or try to be creative about what do those requirements mean versus the other 364 days in which that particular square foot of something can be used, right? Does it have to be hardscape? Can it be permeable? Can it be soft? What else can we think collectively, right, that we really get very good utility for this space and that we make something that we're all really proud of? Those were my only 5 points. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcos. Those are great comments. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I do just want to take 1 second to address a couple of the questions that were in the chat. I noticed there were some kind of comments about how to have this kind of naturalized or soft edge while still building high enough for future sea level rise. And I think, Andrea, you started to answer that, but just wanted to clarify that, yes, one of the ways to do that is to kind of pull the bulkhead back in places to create space outboard of that for kind of softer edges and for native landscapes. Another strategy you'll see in other parts of the city is like a stepped bulkhead condition where you have kind of a bi-level structure there. So there's different ways to do it, and the kind of project team is considering that. So I think in future meetings, we can talk more about kind of what that condition can look like. With that, I believe everyone has had a chance to speak at least once. So we'll start kind of going into people who might have a second round of comments. So Magnus, this time you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, this has been very interesting listening to everybody's point of view here. And I feel you can, I'm not an urban planner, I'm an educator, actually a public school educator. But I think you can look at this from like a big perspective and a small perspective. And on the large perspective, I was thinking that you connect this to a bigger whole. You connect this to other green initiatives in New York City. Like I live out in Bay Ridge, for example, where apparently the sewage is heading. Thanks a lot. So I'm familiar with the Owl's Head facility and Owl's Head Park, which is a lovely park. And there's some interesting features of Owl's Head. There's also the 68th Street Pier. So how interesting, and I know that we've talked about canoeing and boating, but and there's a park in Sunset Park. Now I'm thinking really big that you connect, there's some kind of canoeing route where you connect to different nature centers, one in Bay Ridge, then in Sunset Park, and then, I don't know, one in Red Hook, one in Brooklyn Heights. Gowanus would be its own. So it's like, this is part of a bigger picture, in other words. And so you think big. And then going into the small perspective, I'm thinking one probably should be careful that there's not too much boating going on. And I heard human-powered boating sounds like the way to go. Small kayaks, not too many. And I also think the bridge is a great idea, but I think one has to be careful with the placement of the bridge. Obviously, people will think, oh, it should go on the peninsula, on the tip, but maybe that's not where it should go. I like the idea that it's raised up above so there can be nature underneath, but maybe the bridge needs to be a little discreet to the side. I don't know, that you leave the peninsula, you let that be a peninsula, in other words, going back to letting nature. And the final thing I want to say is, that you go slow. You don't do too much. You have a vision that goes in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So, sort of like the High Line. They started with a small piece of the High Line. They had 5 phases, I think, at the High Line, for example, which is another great facility that where I bring my kids. Just another example of bringing back nature to the city in an interesting way. So I think I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magnus. So we have about 5 more minutes in the breakout room, and then we'll all reconvene to talk about next steps and stuff. So we have time for a few more comments. Andrea, do you want to?
Yes, one more quick comment. I'm so happy to be in this room, and I'm so glad to hear all of the feedback that's been given. I would say one thing that hasn't been mentioned is an education facility that connects to the CSO facility itself. So a way that specifically kids, but also, you know, larger community members can actually see the way the CSO facility is working, similar to the Newtown Creek Education Center.
Awesome, thank you, Andrea. Chris, last thought? No? Gary, last thought?
Yeah, I would like to think of the water itself and access to the water as the bridge, access points on the west side of the canal, access points in multiple places where this blue way where people can paddle and walk and wend their way through our little environment right here in the canal and experience the life and the biodiversity from land and water. That would be my dream come true, is, you know, access everywhere to allow people to get down and engage with the water. Multiple boat ramps or docks or different kinds of accesses, soft edges that actually touch the water. I'm a little confused about the soft edge thing that somehow only starts 3 feet above high water. That doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't, that's not a soft edge in my head. But I would like to be able to touch the water myself easier. I'm involved with the GCC doing a high school program where we're trying to get kids to design habitat for the shore. And we're trying to get those kids to realize how much life is actually in the canal right now, but also to wake them up to their environment, their surroundings, and their access. And that's how we do it, is we get them close enough to see and to touch. This water is going to be some of the cleanest in New York City. It is absolutely the safest conditions. It's a mill pond. For the majority of the year, there's hardly any current, there's hardly any windage, there's hardly any fetch, there's hardly any traffic. It's literally a paddle in paradise. That's what I would like it to be. All of those pretty pictures that Scape is done across the decades of all the paddle boarders, that's me. I want to see the real people out there, because I've not seen a single other paddle boarder on that canal. And I have paddled for 7 years now. I've paddled year round. I've not seen a single other paddle boarder. The only other paddlers are the Gowanus dredgers. I've seen Carolina from Portside, who's brought her kayak up in. That's it. We got an absolute, you know, the graffiti, "Welcome to Venice, Jericho." It's real. This is Venice. Let's make it Venice. Claim it. Come on, guys. You got this. You can do it. Draw some good stuff. Design us some good stuff, please.
Thank you guys so much for all of your comments. You were so thoughtful. I love our breakout room. So we've written down everything you've said on the Miro board here. I've got like a long list of notes on my desk. This is tremendously helpful. It's just so great to be able to hear directly from all of you. So I think we're gonna go back into the main room now. Assume okay. So bear with me. I don't know how to, I think you might have to hit leave room. Okay, we'll all do it together. All right, see you on the other side.
Thanks.